Welcome to the Apple Insider Podcast. This is your host, Stephen Robles, and today we're going to be talking about AirPods Max after 1 year, a massive iPad app roundup, some of our favorites, and Jack Dorsey stepped down from the Twitter CEO position. We're going to talk about all of that in a moment. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Masterclass, Prisoner Wine, Bespoke Post, and VPLS. You'll hear about those in a moment. And joining me to do this massive iPad app roundup is my friend Wes Hilliard. How's it going, Wes?
Pretty good, Stephen. Just trying to think of what Apple Insider would be called if we were a Web3 rename.
That's good. That's a deep cut. And we're going to talk about that Square rebranding in a moment. Wanted to hit a few news bits, and then we're going to get to an AirPods Max review and then all the apps that I mentioned. First of all, there's been some reports of the 16-inch M1 Pro and M1 Max having charging issues and having issues in clamshell mode. And I just wanted to say that I have my 14-inch MacBook Pro that I use every day. I use it very often in clamshell mode, and I've not had any of those issues. I don't know if this might be unique to the 16-inch. So listeners, if you have a 16-inch new MacBook Pro out there, I'd be curious to hear your experience with that. But also, when it comes to charging, there's been some reports that maybe MagSafe charging is one of the issues, and I've actually not used MagSafe charging since the first day I got it. I used it when I was doing the migration assistant from my old MacBook to my new one. And then after that, because my whole life has been USB-C and Thunderbolt, I have not used MagSafe charging ever since that first day. Now, you actually have one of the new MacBook Pros also. What's been your experience with MagSafe?
I saw that it wasn't a space gray cable and put it in a drawer, and that's as far as I got.
Oh, I see.
No, I use my MacBook at my desk. Basically, when I got this thing, I just put it in the spot the iPad was in and plugged in the same Thunderbolt cable. Nothing changed, and it charges off the cable. There's really no reason to use MagSafe at my desk. Yeah, and my battery never moves off of 80%. Apparently, it decided that it's just going to stay there, and that's fine. I mean, every now and then I'll take it to the living room or something to play around with, but most of the time it's a work computer. It stays where I work, so.
Yeah, and to that charging 80% thing, we actually had many listeners reach out this week over Twitter with some app recommendations, but also Dave from Indianapolis mentioned a few other Mac apps that I'll put in the show notes. He mentioned AdGuard, Peak Hour, iPulse, and one of them was Al Dente Pro, which is a Mac app that helps you manage charging level. So if you want it to stay at 80% charge, even when plugged in, this app manually forces that on a Mac. But if you're running Big Sur or macOS Monterey and you have a recent MacBook Pro, I have found that when it's kept docked in clamshell mode or not, but if you just keep it docked for extended periods of time, it kind of manages that charge by itself. And oftentimes I will see in the battery icon when I click it that it's at 80%, and it's basically saying holding because it's been plugged in for a while. And I think there's an option where you can kind of say, no, I want you to fully charge, but you can kind of set those preferences now built into macOS, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, this was an iOS feature first where it did the trickle charge after 80%, and it would estimate when you would be removing the phone from the charger based on past history and stuff like that. I think macOS just gained that, and yeah, you can go turn it off if you really want to, but it's not that critical. I don't know why people spend so much time thinking about batteries. I think it's leftovers from the 2006 era of just everything exploding. Yeah, these days you don't need to think about it. I tell people all the time, like on Reddit, like one of the popular questions all the time is, how do you manage charging your iPhone to keep your battery sustained as long as possible? And you don't. There's a computer in there. It does it for you. You're not smarter than that computer. I promise. Just charge your stuff and don't think about it. Eventually you might need a battery, and that'll cost you like, I don't know, $80. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, I'll put as the chapter art as you listen the battery settings in macOS. There's actually a checkbox now, at least in macOS Big Sur and Monterey, where it says optimize battery charging. And it says to reduce battery aging, your Mac learns from your daily charging routine so it can wait to finish charging past 80% until you need to use it on batteries. So now macOS is smart enough on that. I think some of the battery stuff, I think about battery, and I think sometimes, if you used super fast charging all the time, I think there's some data that has shown that will wear on the battery a little faster, but
absolutely,
again, not like a massive difference. I do remember back in the day, I was at an Apple store and someone was at the Genius Bar saying that their battery, doesn't last anymore. If they unplug their old MacBook Pro, it just turns off. And the Apple Genius was like, do you leave it plugged in most of the time? And the lady was like, it's plugged in 24/7. It sits at my desk. I never unplug it. And they were like, yeah, that's going to be an issue. Like that's why it died in a year instead of lasting for several years. But that was an older MacBook Pro. There was not this optimized battery charging in the recent macOS version. So I think it's a holdover from some of those experiences and people just wanting their battery to last as long as possible.
Well, yeah, that's fair. I mean, I'm crazy. I don't know. I have a MagSafe charger on the table by my couch. I charge my phone wirelessly on a wireless charger by my bedside. So I never plug into Lightning port, which is obviously the most efficient and safe way to charge a battery, and I'm fine. Oh, look, I'm at 100%. It'll probably tick down to 99 soon. Generally speaking, I've noticed new iPhones tick down that first percent around January, and then you see all the people screaming on Reddit about how batteries are, going to explode and they have to change it out too early and planned obsolescence and all of that. And it's like, calm down, guys. 99% is fine.
I'm still at 100% battery health too, so I try not to look at it, and I just believe it stays at 100% for the year I have the phone. That's my general.
When you upgrade every year, I guess we benefit from the fact that we don't really have to think about battery. So that is a privileged position. But at the same time, don't think about your battery. Even if you upgrade every 5 years, if you have to get a battery replacement, it's not the end of the world. Go to a Best Buy, pay them $80, get a new battery. You're good.
Well, I wanted to mention Apple Replay and Spotify Wrapped. If you saw people on Twitter and social media sharing their Spotify Wrapped, like what their most played albums and songs were in the past year, and then artists also get data from Spotify about how many plays, listens, and where their listeners are in the world. Spotify does a nice job creating graphically pleasing stuff to share on social media and for people to share the links or whatever. So I was like, well, I want to do an Apple Replay because they have this feature where it'll show you your top played Apple Music songs. Spotify also has this option for podcasts, and I actually tweeted some about the Spotify stats for the AppleInsider podcast, which is actually pretty interesting. That audience has been growing on Spotify more than I expected. Apple does not provide the podcast Wrapped or podcast Replay, but they do provide Apple Music Replay, and it'll give you a playlist of your most played songs in the last year. And then you could share that on social media or whatever. So I went to check it out, and I did find that it was not indicative of what I actually listened to because it had much of what my kids ask HomePods to play as the top songs. And I listen to music, but not super often. But my kids ask the HomePods to play music all the time. And those tracks were all in the top spots of my list because as kids do, they want to listen to the same songs all the time. And so I found my Apple Replay list to be not useful because it basically just showed what my kids asked HomePods to play and not what I listened to in the past year. So,
Steven, you're the HomeKit guy. You should know about all this stuff. No, I had to figure this out last year when I found out my 2020 replay was a bunch of garbage. My niece and nephew would come over and play music, but when they do, they would just play it for, from the time they got there to the time they woke up the next day. And so the HomePod would just be continuously playing, Lil Peep and stuff that I just, please, dear God, never let me listen to that. And yeah, so my 2020 replay playlist is sadly just very broken and terrible, so I deleted it. But I looked into it, and it turns out you have a few options when setting up HomePods on how to manage this. First of all, you can just tell the HomePod not to track your listening history. So public HomePods, like a living room one or one in a bathroom, you can just go ahead and hit that toggle and never even worry about it. But the more in between one, and this one's kind of placing your trust in Apple a little bit, default count, and you can set which of your accounts will be the default one. So me and my girlfriend, we're both on the same HomeKit here, so we see each other's accounts listed. I can pick my HomePod for my bedroom or something like that, and hers downstairs based on where she's listening. Or there's a third one called default account, which it selects your basic Apple ID, but I believe it treats it as separate, and it's tracking it as that HomePod's account. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that it actually does not add it to your up next, because what it's doing is it will always be listening for, Siri will be listening for your voice on any of these HomePods and playing from your account and your preferences based on your voice. If it does not understand who is talking, it will go to a default account. And when it does this, it will just do playback from like whatever range. So you can just tell the HomePod, like, select me as the default or select this non-account account. So that way, if your kids talk to it and it doesn't mistaken it for you, it will not log it to your preferences, hopefully. So far, it seems to have worked. I just turned off the preference altogether for my living room one, so that way I don't have to deal with it, but something to try out.
As you were talking, I went through all of the HomePods in my house, and I have turned off update listening history toggle on all of them. So
that's the safest one.
Yeah, that's the nuclear option. And basically, when you long press your HomePod in the Home app, you scroll down, you hit the settings gear icon, and then you scroll down in the music and podcast section, and you will see update listening history, and you can toggle it off. In that same section also is the primary user for the HomePod where you can change what Wes was talking about. But I just turned off update listening history on everything. And maybe my 2022 Apple Replay will be useful.
Well, what's cool about Replay is it's different from Spotify Wrapped. Wrapped apparently only covers January to October because it's doing all of this data. I guess they cut it off at a certain amount and then start generating that on the back end. So that way by December 1st, you can get your Wrapped. But yes, it only covers 10 months out of the year. Whereas Apple's Replay, yeah, you don't get all those cool fancy slideshow things and weird memeable comments from some algorithm. You do get your playlist, your top 100 listened, and starting about the third week of January, I can't remember when it ticked in last year. It was a little late in 2021, but it does show up sometime in January, February. You can go to Replay and get your playlist starting at the beginning of the year, and it updates every single week with your top 100 all the way throughout to the end of the year. And you can see those stats anytime by visiting the webpage, but the playlist itself stays updated in your Apple Music and your app. So
gotcha.
Something to keep in mind. It's a pretty neat little feature. I'll be keeping an eye out for the 2022 one starting in January.
Very cool. Well, I did want to mention Jack Dorsey. He was the CEO of Twitter. Has actually stepped down as CEO. And I'm going to do my best to pronounce it. Forgive me if it's mispronounced, but Paraj Agrawal, he's taking over as the new company CEO for Twitter. Interestingly, when Jack Dorsey announced this via a screenshot of the staff email he sent to the Twitter staff and then tweeted that screenshot of the email. That's how Jack announced it on Twitter. That the stock for Twitter actually went up 11% on the announcement of his departure. And it's been kind of tenuous whether or not Jack Dorsey was helping Twitter recently. They've tried to do lots of policy changes, trying to put rules and safeguards in place for hate speech and things like that on Twitter. And his policies, and I think just him as a personality, kind of makes Twitter, the company, kind of put it in a tumultuous light. And so investors are not really sure. So stock went up when he announced it. And he said that Paraj has been already involved in the company. He was the chief technical officer for Twitter since 2011. So he is at least 10 years already at the company, and Jack Dorsey had great things to say about him. I will mention Jack Dorsey is still remaining the CEO of Square, which is the payment processing app. They also do Square Cash, the app like Venmo to send money to other people. But they are rebranding Square, and they are rebranding it to a Web3 kind of thing called Block. So from Square, it is now Block. And talking about how it wants to have a future in the blockchain and cryptocurrency, but also continue its Square products and Square Cash. So they rebranded. Their website for the rebrand is very interesting. It's pretty cool animations for a website, but definitely very modern Web3 forward-thinking kind of thing. Rebranding it, it's fine. I always thought I'm a big Squarespace user. I build a lot of websites in Squarespace, and so I did think there was some name pollution around the idea of Square. So maybe it's better that they're rebranding now. I mean, Square's been around forever, but just Squarespace, then you have Square. It used to be called Square Up when it was just kind of the headphone jack card swipe reader kind of thing. But I thought that was interesting. So,
well, this is kind of an alphabet thing because it's Block includes Tidal. There's an unnamed blockchain company run by Jack that has a Twitter account. It's some random garbled numbers and letters. But like it's supposed to encompass all of these things under one thing. And I believe the Square name isn't going away. It's just going to be Square by Block or something like that, which is really even more annoying. I don't know. We'll see. I'm not excited because all this blockchain stuff is ridiculous. All these companies, like if you've seen me on Twitter lately, it just seems like we're we've invented the wheel and we're using it as a dinner table. Nobody knows what to use this stuff for, and so we're using it as currency. And I don't believe that's the right use for blockchain and stuff. Like, it could be a great tool for the internet and information and stuff like that, but we're out here selling JPEGs, and it's so annoying. But yeah, we'll see.
NFTs.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. This Web3 movement, I think it's all just it's what is it, Y2K, or it's like a name brand for the internet kind of thing. Just a flash in the pan. Everyone who's excited about it's the ones making money off of it, and everyone else is just kind of like, why do I care? Situation. Square's doing this because Jack Dorsey is definitely the type of person who wants to get on a bandwagon, and Meta kind of just stepping up the game there. So I think Jack's trying to compete with Mark Zuckerberg a little bit. I wonder what this means for Twitter. I'm glad that this happened outside of Twitter. Like, I'm glad that they're not trying to go tweet cubed or something. We'll see what this new management looks like and what they're going to do with the company. Not making some great decisions in these first days with media management and stuff, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I really just want Twitter to remain the good anti-Facebook social media that still works, because if they start breaking it, I don't know where we're going to go. So
yeah, I agree, and I'm hoping Twitter is around for a while. The whole Web3 thing, listeners, if you're curious to know more about it, I've been debating on doing kind of a bonus supporter only episode talking about the metaverse, but also some of this Web3 stuff. If you follow like Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V on social media, he's super bullish on the whole NFT thing. He's like, plane tickets will be NFTs one day. And I'm like,
hey, Gary, yeah, Vaynerchuk, the guy, Planet of the Apps. Ooh, yeah, definitely good choice there too, Gary.
Yeah, well, we'll see. If listeners, if you're interested in some of that stuff, it's not really Apple related, although it's very adjacent. Maybe we'll do some bonus episodes on that because I've been curious to talk about it. So anyway, tweet at me if that's something you want to hear about.
Internet technology adjacent.
Yeah, it's all internet technologies. This episode is brought to you by Bespoke Post. This fall, as you get back into the swing of things, Bespoke Post is here with a new seasonal lineup of must-have Box of Awesome collections. And Bespoke Post partners with small businesses and emerging brands to bring you the most unique goods every month. I've gotten several Box of Awesomes myself, and I love what they come with. It's kind of rustic items that had a canvas day travel bag that came in one of my boxes, which I love, special drink glasses, and I like to feel like I'm a little fancy, a little rustic, and these things just come in the mail. And I know they're from small businesses, so we're supporting those small businesses with every box. From autumn craft beers to cozy threads, Box of Awesome has collections for every part of your life. I love their collections too, with some of their camping and outdoorsy gear with really interesting knives and bags and travel stuff. Love it all. To get started, you can take the quiz at boxofawesome.com, and your answers will help them pick the right Box of Awesome for you. They release new boxes every month across a ton of different categories. It's free to sign up, and you can skip a month anytime. One guy actually skipped 2 years worth of months, but kept his account active, which you can do if you'd like, and you don't pay anything if you skip a month. Each box costs only $45, but has over $70 worth of gear inside. Plus, with each Box of Awesome, you're supporting small businesses. 90% of everything that comes in your Box of Awesome is from a small, up-and-coming brand, and I love supporting brands like that. So get 20% off your first monthly box when you sign up at boxofawesome.com and enter the promo code AppleInsider, all one word, at checkout. That's boxofawesome.com, promo code AppleInsider for 20% off your first box. And that link will be in the show notes as well. Our thanks to Box of Awesome for sponsoring this episode and our friends at the Prisoner Wine Company. I love the Prisoner Wine Company because they do things differently, from the artwork on the label of the bottle to the taste of their wine. I love the entire experience of drinking the Prisoner Wine Company wines. Wine is like fine art. It can be good, bad, but every once in a while, something is truly different, something unique, and that's the Prisoner Wine Company. 20 years ago, when they decided to combine some of California's best and most unusual grape varieties to make a bold and complex blend, they set on a mission to do things differently. Like their namesake wine, the Prisoner Red Blend. From the shape and weight of the bottle to the beautiful labels. I love the brands on these bottles because, you're going to keep your wine somewhere where people can see. And these labels have Francisco Goya's artwork right on the bottles. Love it. And they have rule-bending blends like the Prisoner Red Blend, Prisoner Chardonnay, and Thorn Merlot. Now listen, I'm not a sommelier. I'm not like a wine professional, but I've had some wines over the years, and I truly enjoy the Prisoner Wine Company. Not just the branding and how it looks, but how it tastes. I find it unique, and truly one of the best I've had. Prisoner is one of Napa Valley's most recognized red blends, and the Prisoner Wine Company has been featured in Wine Spectator, Forbes, and Food and Wine. You got to experience these wines, so go to theprisonerwine.com/AppleInsider for 20% off, plus shipping included on your first purchase. You can still get it in time for the holidays. This is the best deal they have available. Get 20% off plus shipping included at theprisonerwine.com/AppleInsider. That's theprisonerwine.com/AppleInsider. That link will be in the show notes as well. You can just click it there. Offer valid on first-time online orders only for U.S. residents of legal drinking age through December 31st, 2021. Other exclusions may apply. Please enjoy wines responsibly. All right, well, I did want to talk about AirPods Max for a moment. Wes, you and I got AirPods Max right when they came out last December, and so it's been about a year. I did the classical musicians review them early on. That video's on YouTube. I'll put that link in show notes if you want to check that out. That was a pretty popular take. A lot of people liked it, but I've been seeing people tweet about it recently, about AirPods Max, and I saw like Canoopsy, the YouTube video creator, he was asking, hey, is it still worth it? Should I get AirPods Max? Then I saw other Twitter users like Renee. Then I saw other creators like Renee Ritchie and Quinn from Snazzy Labs kind of not being super positive on it. They said they've had some bugs and all that. So I just thought it would be interesting, Wes, for you and I to give our thoughts on AirPods Max after a year.
It's important to understand Quinn Nelson's social media game. If you follow this guy, he's great. No bones against him, but just note that he is very well versed in the I love yelling negative things about products to get people's eyes and then posting videos about how much he loves them on YouTube. Just that's like his whole thing. And I agree, though, not everything's always going to be rainbows. You know, I haven't experienced the issues that these guys are saying that they've had, but I believe that they're having them. So it's just one of those things, but
right.
It's always worth noting.
So I will say, yeah, I had not experienced the bugs that they're talking about. And let me just say, first of all, I use the AirPods Max weekly. I've gone back to editing this podcast with AirPods Max. I do use them for focused work time. And I've talked about before kind of how I have a different use case for every model of AirPod. I have some where I use the new AirPods 3 around the house and going for a walk. I use AirPods Pro with their noise canceling for like grocery shopping or public environments where I want some noise canceling. And if I want deep focused work time or really just want to enjoy the music I'm listening to, I'll use my AirPods Max. Or if I'm watching like a movie on my iPad and I want the really good spatial audio, AirPods Pro and AirPods do that as well, but it's just a better experience in AirPods Max. So I don't use them daily, but I do use them multiple times a week and have been for the past year. And I will say I still really enjoy them. I enjoy using them. I still think they sound really, really good for music or movie watching. I've learned that if I turn off noise canceling and transparency, where I just use them in their don't do anything funny to the outside environment setting, which you can do in the control center when you're using AirPods Max, I found editing the podcast to be more accurate using that setting. And so I use them often. The only funny behavior I have found is sometimes they don't connect immediately when I take them out of the case. And I'll have to like put them back in for a second to kind of put them back to sleep and then take them back out to wake them up to reconnect. Sometimes it's because I don't use the case it came with. I use the, I think it's Waterfield design, like that canvas case where it has these like kind of built-in magnets to do it. So that might be part of the reason. Some of the other funniness has really just been with Apple's own auto switching feature. And I've turned it off on specific AirPods on specific devices because a lot of times I'll be editing a podcast with AirPods Max on my iPad mini, and then I'd pick up my phone because I got a text message or whatever, and they would just switch so fast to my iPhone and it would cut off the podcast I was editing and fare out on my iPad. And so I turned off auto switching for some of those use cases. But if you can figure out what auto switching to turn off on what devices, the auto switching is not as big of an issue anymore. But overall, I still really enjoy them. I still think they sound great. To this question of are they worth it a year later, I think headphones like these, you're not going to have to worry about them getting some kind of updated version with some tremendous feature that makes these obsolete. If you look at normal headphones that you would use either in a studio situation or wired headphones like the ones I'm using when I record the podcast, these Bear Dynamic ones, you usually keep over-the-ear headphones for a long time because they are the quality that they are. And that's kind of just what you need when you're listening to music or podcasts or whatever.
This isn't something you're going to upgrade every year.
Right. You're not going to upgrade it every year or even every couple years. If Apple makes a second generation one, and if the battery runs down, Apple has already said that there is a battery replacement program for AirPods Max, and so you could do that and it would last a long time. Again, Canoopsy's question on Twitter was, is it worth it now to pay, the full price of $550? And my recommendation is, I've seen many sales over the past year on AirPods Max. Some Best Buy and Amazon sales get really close to that $400 mark. I think they've been like $420 or something.
If you're listening this weekend, like the weekend this comes out, there's a set for $429 on Amazon right now that you can get.
Yeah, and for that price, again, if you have the money and it's not a stretch, I wouldn't like save up for months and then get this as opposed to some other piece of equipment, just depending on your situation. But for $420, if you're in the market for good over-the-ear noise-canceling headphones, I did not have a pair of ANC active noise-canceling headphones over-the-ear before these. I did not have any of the Sony XM4s. I didn't have, some of the other fancy ones you can get. Like, I didn't have any. And so this was going to be my single pair of high-end over-the-ear ANC headphones. And so again, just depending on your situation, if you already have some Sony XM4s or another pair of over-the-ear headphones that you really love, that are wireless and they have good features, maybe it's not worth it for you specifically to upgrade. But if you're looking to get a pair of over-the-ear active noise-canceling headphones that are really high quality, I still love the build quality of the AirPods Max and the overall design. I think they're still a good buy, especially when you can get it on those kinds of sales. What do you think, Wes?
Well, I believe these are going to be upgraded at about the same rate the AirPods Pro are. Maybe 2 years at the most. Me personally, I'll buy a new set if it comes out, just because I believe whatever upgrades they provide will fix whatever weirdness. I haven't really found any weird spots. I just know that it's not like a perfect device, that there are things to improve. I'm just not the one to improve them. I couldn't tell you. I'm sure the next set will probably fold up into a smaller, more compact travel design. They'll probably change a little bit about how these things sleep and wake, stuff like that. I've definitely noticed that, because I keep mine on a headphone stand without the case on them. There's a little lightning cable there where I can just plug it in. If it's not plugged in, that thing, they'll just drain. They'll connect to whatever's nearby and dump out the battery over a couple days, and I can go to use them and they're at 10%. So whatever standby features Apple implemented with this, they're not good enough. That kind of stuff is just obvious. Like, they made the case because the standby modes aren't good enough. I think Apple knew that the intelligence just wasn't going to be there for them. Beyond that, like, they're great headphones. They sound amazing. Every time I use them, I love them. I'm still awed by just the sound quality, the instruments that I'm hearing sometimes for the first time in songs that I've listened to for years.
Yeah.
That still hits me. And the spatial audio features, if you're not a purist and you're not going to hate on the fact that it sounds different, like, because some of the songs aren't mixed well, but find some good mixed albums, good mixed songs, and they really hit hard and they're really well done. I'm excited because the spatial audio music feature is still new. We haven't really seen, I'm sure there was a couple, you could probably point me at a couple, but we haven't really seen like full studio albums developed beginning to end with spatial audio in mind. Once we start seeing stuff like that from like good professionals who know what they're doing and know how to use this equipment, know how to optimize for 3D audio, I think it's going to start really blowing people's minds. And AirPods Max are the first Apple step into that world. So there's going to be some bugs. There's going to be some weirdness. But for me, I've not really ran into issues. I personally like the noise canceling modes. I like transparency mode if I'm walking around, or if I'm sitting still, I'll usually have active noise canceling on. It's still kind of insane to me that, like, if I want to sit in my bedroom with the heater on and that heater is loud, it's a fan. I put the headphones on and it might as well not exist, and I can watch like 5.1 channel audio tracks on the TV, and it's like I'm not even wearing headphones. It's really cool.
Yeah.
As far as the price, Apple sometimes does step into that territory. They have a $5,000 monitor. These headphones, I think, kind of fall into the same category of that monitor. It's expensive for the sake of expensiveness. There are probably better options for, a couple $100 less, but if you have the $400, $500 available and you're looking for some headphones and you just like what Apple does, yeah, for sure. These are an absolute buy.
Yeah. And what you're willing to pay for something is a big factor too. Like your example for a t-shirt, I remember I went to the mall at Millennia here at Orlando, and I think there was like a Hugo Boss clothing store. And I am not a fashion forward person I just don't.
Just walk into a Banana Republic and spend $40 on a crew neck.
Not even, I mean, yeah, like Kohl's. Kohl's is my fashion source. And I remember seeing a t-shirt at that store that was $120. For me, I'm just not going to pay $120 for a t-shirt just because that's not my focus. That's not what I care about, but some people are, and that's what they want. And they know the difference that $120 t-shirt is compared to something else. And so again, if you are in the world of audio, whatever part of that world is, maybe it's music, maybe it's podcasts, maybe you travel a ton on airplanes and noise canceling is super important. The in-ear style of AirPods Pro don't work for you, then the AirPods Max is the decision if you want to stay in the Apple ecosystem. So look at all those factors together, whether it's worth it or not. I would not be dissuaded by the kind of bug reports you see some people say on Twitter. Again, Wes and I have used them for the past year pretty often and have not experienced those. Again, everyone's mileage may vary, but I still enjoy them. That's my thoughts.
The question of, is it worth it? Isn't really. They're worth it. They're good headphones. I think the question should be, do you have expendable income and do you like Apple products? If you can answer both of those as yes, go for it. I mean, if that's, if you're even looking at these, then obviously you're in the market for the headphones in the first place. So if you can answer those two questions positively, then they're worth it. Go get them.
Right.
I don't see Apple updating these at least until the end of next year. AirPods Pro probably getting updated in the spring. There's some possibility that there's going to be like an H2 headset chipset or something. If that happens, expect the AirPods Max to get updated probably sooner, but it's very iffy at this point. But personally, I'm excited for whatever they throw this way, because I'm very much all in on whatever augmented reality nonsense Apple's throwing our way at this point for
sure
3D audio, and I think these headphones are going to be a part of it.
Yeah. Well, before we get into our big iPad app roundup, I did want to do two parts of follow-up. I already mentioned before, but Dave from Indianapolis sent me an email with some additional macOS apps and utility recommendations. Those are in the show notes if you'd like to check those out. And also, at Sirdir, SIRDIR on Twitter, tweeted a tip at me about the two-factor integration of iCloud Keychain. I talked about on the last episode with William that I could not get my 1Password and iCloud Keychain two-factor codes to match using that specialized token, that 6-digit number that refreshes every 30 seconds. I couldn't get him to match, so I wasn't able to use iCloud Keychain for my two-factor stuff. And he tweeted and said, when you put it in iCloud Keychain, if you're not scanning the QR code directly from whatever service, you need to just copy the unique token, not the full URL, because if you go into 1Password and you look at your two-factor codes, some of it is a long URL that whatever app or website like Amazon or Google, they'll give you this long link for that two-factor authentication code. And 1Password, I guess, can parse that differently. But if you don't copy the whole URL, you just get that kind of unique token or string, however the URL is kind of singling that out. If you just take that portion of the URL and put that into iCloud Keychain, then I was able to get my two-factor codes to match, and I've been able to use iCloud Keychain two-factor codes. And if I pull up 1Password and system preferences on the Mac or on my iPhone in settings, passwords, the two-factor codes, the 6-digit ones match. I think it's a little strange that Apple will serve up a 6-digit code that is false because I put the full URL instead of a single token. I guess it doesn't know the difference, or I guess it's pulling from somewhere. So I think it's strange that it just gives you something that's wrong rather than just giving you an error or whatever. But because of that tip, I was able to change my two-factor settings in iCloud Keychain, and now those 6-digit codes work. So thank you, at Sirdir, for that tip.
Yeah, the codes aren't being sent to you from some server somewhere. It's being generated based on some crazy algorithm, on your device. So if you're using a different, key for your algorithm that they're using for theirs, then yeah, you're going to get two different codes for the same algorithm, and yeah, you're messing yourself up. I've been using iCloud Keychain. I went all in. I just got rid of 1Password except for work stuff, and been liking it so far. It's all very instant, and generally speaking, as long as the web page and stuff is coded correctly, it automatically just pops up and says, hey, you have this two-factor key, use Face ID to authenticate and you're done, or Touch ID on the Mac or whatever. It's worked out pretty well so far. I'm happy with it. I actually went the other day, just quick tangent, and set up Mom on a new iPhone 13. And while I was in there, I said, you know what? You have a Yahoo address from like 11 years ago. Yahoo is no, we're not going to do that. So
doing that.
So I went ahead and created her an iCloud email and then went through her, like I have, I don't know, some stupid hundreds of passwords in my keychain. I looked at hers, she might have had 20. So I just went ahead and changed her keychain passwords to new passwords and showed her how to use keychain and stuff.
Yeah.
I actually went ahead and changed her emails to not her new email address, but hide my emails from Apple, just to tinker around with. And she hasn't noticed the difference. It just signs her in because it's all on the keychain. And I thought that was a pretty cool thing. I might eventually at least do my primary accounts and hide my email. But man, I've got a few too many to just do all of them wholesale. But have you used hide my email much yet?
I have for a few things. And I'm kind of doing it whenever I have to set up a new account or put my email somewhere for the first time. I'll default to that, like sign in with Apple and use like the obscured email address. So I'm not going to go back and like change everything, but I'm kind of using it going forward and it's been working fine. I've also been using the custom email domain features for iCloud email. And because of that, now I've been using the hide my email more.
Nice. Yeah, I don't have a custom domain. I'm not that fancy, so.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have a huge roundup of iPad apps we need to get to. Wes and I both have a ton of apps, and then listeners, many of you tweeted in some recommendations, so we're going to try to get to all of them. We won't be going super in-depth on these apps because we just have a ton to get through, but I will recommend, I'm putting links to all of these apps in the podcast episode notes or show description. But if you're listening in Apple Podcasts, there is a maximum character limit for episode descriptions in Apple Podcasts, so you will not see the full list if you're listening in Apple Podcasts. So if you'd like to see the entire list uncut off, unobstructed, you can go to another podcast app like Overcast, Pocket Casts, even Spotify displays the full show notes. There is no character limit. Or you can go to AppleInsider.com and look at the podcast post there, and you can see all of the app links right there. But if you're in Apple Podcasts, you won't see all the links. So I just wanted to give you that warning. If you're looking for an app to download it, but don't see it in Apple Podcasts, that's why. And there's not anything I can do about it. So.
Before we dive in, I just want to point out that I listened to you and William talk about this stuff last week, and you barely mentioned the existence of Apple apps. I just want to point out that most of what I use that aren't what we go over here, like I default to Apple on most things, Safari, Photos, Notes. That's my go-to stuff. If anyone was wondering, I know you use like Bear and stuff like that. I just thought it was funny that you guys listed a bunch of extensions and stuff, but didn't discuss if you really bothered with any Apple apps.
That is a good point. I will say, and I was going to mention a couple of them in this roundup. I do use Apple's Work Suite exclusively. I don't really use Google Docs. I don't use Microsoft products. I use Pages, Numbers, and Keynote for pretty much everything. So yeah. Definitely that. And I am a Safari first user. I do use Chrome on occasion for web development things just because there's some tools and extensions there that are not on Safari yet. But as Safari extensions have been increasing in number, hopefully pretty soon I can just use Safari exclusively. I would love that. But yeah, I totally am with you there. I use Apple's apps for many of the first-party solutions for sure. I'm going to split my list in half and I'll go through my first half of the list and then I'll throw to you. And we'll just go back and forth, and then we'll get our listener recommendations in as well. So for iPad, these are some of the apps that I use regularly, or at least are some of the most useful, even if I don't use them all the time, and that I have them on my iPad now, and I just think are some of the best. First one, you've heard me talk about it before, but I have to mention it again. Ferrite Studio for iPad. It's the app I use to edit all my podcasts. I edit the Apple Insider Show, HomeKit Insider, my Movies on the Side podcast. I edit everything in Ferrite with the Apple Pencil. I still believe it is an incredible product, the fastest, and for me personally, the best way to edit podcasts and some other audio things I've done in there. Ferrite is just an incredible app by Woogie Juice. I did an interview actually with Canis, the developer of Ferrite. He's a one-man team. He does not have like employees or anything. It's just this one guy building this app, and it's an incredible work he's doing over there. So Ferrite for iPad, absolutely love it. 2 apps for marking up things like PDFs or for taking notes like handwritten notes, or if you want some like page templates like line sheets to be able to use on your iPad. 2 apps that I highly recommend. I have both of them on my iPad. Good Notes, which was also a listener recommendation, and Notability. These two applications I use all the time for importing like PDFs and marking them up. Maybe it's importing graphics. If you work with like graphic designers and you want to be able to mark up an image to show the graphic designer exactly what you're wanting, that's a great use case. Whenever I have to fill out a form that's a PDF that I download from somewhere or I got via email and it's lengthy, I use the built-in markup feature like in my email if I just need to sign something quickly digitally. But if I need to work on a larger document or a big PDF, Good Notes, Notability are great options there. This next pick is specifically for musicians, singers, things like that. If you do anything with sheet music, I have used this app from the very beginning, from my very first iPad. I am a musician. I did a lot of choral work when I was early days of iPad. And Fourscore, F-O-R-S-C-O-R-E, Fourscore is an incredible application. They regularly update it with more and more features. If you have digital sheet music or you want to start using sheet music on an iPad, my wife uses this. She plays flute in an orchestra here in Central Florida. She loves using Fourscore. I've used it for chord charts and trumpet music and choral music. Fourscore is incredible. You can mark up PDFs. You can sync it with other iPads. So if you have like an entire group all looking at the same piece of sheet music and you want to be able to sync it, so when you advance the page, it syncs to all the other devices, Fourscore does that. It works with Bluetooth pedals. If you want to be able to change the page on iPad with your foot without tapping the screen, you can get Bluetooth wireless pedals that switch the page. It's an incredible application for music. Fourscore, highly recommend. This is an Apple app, like Wes was saying, Shortcuts. Shortcuts makes devices like the iPad so much more productive. I do a lot of things with Shortcuts, even something as simple as converting a PDF to image files or vice versa. If I have some images and I want to make them into a PDF, just little shortcuts like that. I encourage you to listen to the Matthew Castanelli episode I had with him. We talked about shortcuts there. We have 2 episodes actually, just talking about all the different shortcuts we use. I highly recommend Shortcuts. Try to get into it. Lightroom, of all the Adobe apps, I don't use any on my Mac, and I really try not to use any of them because I just don't prefer them. But for photo editing on iPad, I do use Lightroom because it's integration with Apple Pencil, integration with Adobe Cloud, syncing it to Lightroom on my iPhone. I do really love Lightroom for photo editing. I use other apps as well, like Pixelmator, but Lightroom is still just incredible. I've just mentioned Pixelmator, so I'll mention that again. I love Pixelmator. We talked about it in the Mac app roundup with William and myself. But if you do graphic design or you want to edit some photos, Pixelmator has just an incredible product. Awesome app. Highly recommend that. Also in the line of graphics, if you do social media or you just want to make quick graphics for website work or whatever, you might have heard of this tool before, especially if you're a social media manager. Canva, C-A-N-V-A. It's really a service and application specifically for making graphics and media for social media. But Canva's app on iPad is very good. I highly recommend. And again, just great stuff there. And the last one before I throw it to Wes, and then I got some more after it. If you're looking for a VNC application, meaning a service where you can remote into other computers, either on the local network or to use a service where you can log into remote computers anywhere in the world, I've been using Jump, J-U-M-P. I have this installed on about 30 different Macs in my workplace, and I can VNC into those computers from my iPad using Jump whenever I need to. It's been super solid. I've been able to log in. I don't think I've ever had connectivity issues. And you can also use it if you don't want to install the Jump utility on a Mac. You can actually just use the IP address for a local machine on the local network. And if you're in the same house or on the same network, you can access and screen share with a Mac from the Jump app without, installing anything on the Mac. So VNC application, I've been using Jump. There's also Screens by Edovia, but I've not been able to get that to work on as many computers with different network things and port stuff. And I just didn't want to deal with it. And I found Jump to be more flexible in that arena. This episode is brought to you by Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the world's best minds anytime, anywhere, and at your own pace. You can learn cooking from Gordon Ramsay, acting from Samuel L. Jackson, and scientific thinking from Neil deGrasse Tyson. With over 100 classes from a range of world-class instructors, that thing you've always wanted to do is closer than you think. Listeners, you've heard me talk about Masterclass before, and I still love it. Some of my favorite courses are The Art of Negotiation with Chris Voss, and since watching the movie Dune, I've gone back and watched Hans Zimmer's course on music composition for film. I really love Hans Zimmer as a movie score composer, and his class talking about melodies and themes for characters. I loved every minute of it. And you can watch a lesson in just 10 or 15 minutes, so you can do one on a lunch break, or binge an entire class. If you do something like a cooking show, they have high-quality downloadable documents that are basically rivaling a cookbook that you can get when you do one of those classes. And you can watch Masterclass anywhere, from their app to iPhone, iPad, and even Apple TV, or right on the web. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one for free. This is a BOGO Masterclass offer. So go to masterclass.com/AppleInsider today, and you can redeem that BOGO Masterclass offer. That's masterclass.com/AppleInsider. Terms apply. That link will be in the show notes as well. Our thanks to Masterclass for sponsoring this episode, and VPLS. VPLS is a managed service provider and security provider with a 20-year history of industry-leading customer service. Listen, if you own a small business, or maybe you're on the team that decides the information technology needs for a company, you might need help. Maybe you need someone to manage the IT for your entire company, or just provide guidance on specific projects. Well, VPLS can help. VPLS can be an additional resource for your IT team, or function as a completely outsourced IT department. They offer help desk, managed security, managed backup, and other managed IT services. VPLS shifts the responsibility of managing IT needs from your business leaders and maybe people who are trying to help but don't have the full IT knowledge, and they hand that over to the VPLS certified professionals. VPLS operates 24/7, 365, providing after-hour support for your team, and they have industry experts well-versed in IT needs in various industries. VPLS can handle needs for both large and growing companies and can help your team with IT needs of all sizes. What this means is that they can grow and scale as your business needs change. VPLS is that one-stop shop. They have their own data centers and technical staff to help you handle everything from data protection to server hosting. They do backup and disaster recovery, cloud migration, managed and outsourced help desk and IT support. And if you need help with just specific issues, they do after-hour support, wireless optimization, cabling, cybersecurity audit. If you need any IT help, VPLS is the place to go. So visit www.vpls.com/GoIT. That's vpls.com/GOIT to see all their offers, including low monthly colocation rates for all new customers. vpls.com/GoIT. Our thanks to VPLS for sponsoring this episode. So that's my first group of picks. Wes, talk about your picks for the iPad.
Well, I'll echo Screens. Screens is a good VNC app for the individual. Maybe not so much business related like you're using Jump for. But I've used Screens a lot for getting an iPad to use a Mac remotely and stuff like that. Let's see. I'm going to critique your list. You have like 7 note apps. Just saying. I don't know how you keep up.
They're different.
I don't know how you do it.
Notability and Good Notes is more for like handwritten, like taking notes at a conference or marking up PDFs. And then, I got other notes for writing, just daily show notes or, reminders. Anyway, we're not critiquing anything here.
I'm just picking on you. All right.
Yeah, thank you. You got like 3 note apps in yours too. I don't want to hear about it.
They're writing apps. They're not note apps.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, I'll rebrand mine.
Right. No, I use the Notes app by Apple for pretty much everything because I want all of my notes in one place. And then I break out stuff like, I use reminders for lists and such. So it's kind of a breakup like that too. But I've used Good Notes and Notability in the past, and I found them pretty good, but I think Apple's cannibalized a lot of stuff there, especially like what you were mentioning, signing PDF documents. Like you don't really need a separate app for that anymore. My apps, I like Twitterific. I use Twitter a lot. I have to deal with a lot of junk on Twitter, so I need something that lets me see a chronological timeline. I used Tweetbot in the past, and I poke my nose in there every now and then, but I always end up back at Twitterific just because I think their syncing engine is just really well done, and I usually like the app icons and stuff that they make for it. And it's also just a really good iPad app. It works well either side-by-side modes or in slide over whatever you use it as. For writing, Stephen, I use IA Writer. So this is different from Drafts, which I'll mention in a minute. IA Writer has a file system structure, which when I was iPad only was great because I could just attach parent folder to iWriter and say, this is everything I'm using for AppleInsider as a directory inside of this, and then branch out from there. And you could see this file structure from within the app. And I've managed the this thing we call inside pages. It's basically like an internal wiki we manage ourselves. It's not like a wiki you can edit, but it's where all of the stuff where if you go to, AppleInsider/inside/iPhone, you can read all about all the iPhone stuff. I manage that stuff and keep all of the base text for that in iWriter and a parent-child structure, just like the website. So I can navigate to all of that from that app. It's really good for that kind of stuff, structured writing, things like that. So anyway, Drafts, that's where tech starts. That's the tagline. That's right. I love this app. It is such a great way to just pop open a blank text field to get some information in and move on. I use this a lot for just generating links. I've actually tied Drafts to shortcuts on iPad to allow me to, I have a custom button that I can click. If I highlight some text, have a URL on the clipboard and click this button, it converts it into a HTML link using the link inside of the clipboard instead of text expander, Stephen. This is how I did it.
I see.
Yeah, and yes, it's not universal. This is just in Drafts. This is an iPad. You can't do it everywhere, but it's a really cool function. And this brings up the next app. Text Case is a shortcuts feeder kind of what you would call like an add-on app for shortcuts. So I can actually take text from Drafts, feed it, run a shortcut from Drafts using that one of the custom Drafts actions to open that text in Text Case, modify it, Text Case does uppercase, lowercase letters, adds dashes and spaces where you need it. Basically, you can format anything from one thing into another rather than using shortcuts rules, which don't always cover every variable, takes some of the complexity out of the shortcut to relying on an external app, and then it puts it back into Drafts, formatted exactly how I want it to be. So just a cool way to tie it all together. Yes, it's probably simpler in Text Expander, but this is how you do it on iPad. Those are my writing systems. I definitely like I said, I love that Drafts acts as kind of just a catch-all. You can just throw anything at it. They just added, I want to point out that you can give it a audio file or a video file and it will pop out text in the newest update that just came out yesterday. And I want to try this. This is going to be really useful for stuff like transcribing Apple's earnings calls and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So no more need to pay whatever crazy amount. I mean, I'm sure it's not perfect, but it's using the same voice to text dictation that I'm sure some version of that Drafts use, and it's always been excellent. And you can also use Drafts on the Apple Watch to take voice notes and stuff. So just going long, because Steven has 100 apps, I only have like 8. So I will say the reason that is because again, I use mostly Apple apps, and these things, I don't really bounce around a lot. I do a lot of core work inside of each app rather than having 100 apps, I guess, to do the same thing, Steven, with your 8 Note apps. But
oh my goodness.
I'm just picking.
Yeah,
okay.
I know.
Okay. Buffer, you cannot have a clipboard manager on iPad, but this is the next best thing. If you put this where I keep it in my slide over, it's the one good use of slide over that's just perfectly consistent. I have a bunch of clipboard items that I can't even do this really on Mac very easily because their windowing system is just chaos, and it's not the same, I guess. I would kill for like a slide over like function on Mac without having to just manually create it myself. But I can just put a bunch of text snippets in here and grab them. Again, yes, I understand Text Expander exists, but we're limited a little bit on this tablet. So I put like the HTML for a table row or a specific URL structure for our price guides or stuff like that. So I can just have it a click away. And because of Universal Clipboard, I have my iPad here next to my Mac. I can just tap that saved thing inside a Buffer, which is basically we've talked about these before. It's like a faux clipboard manager, like Paste, stuff like that. It's like a file structure that saves plain text, more or less. And I can tap this and paste on the Mac instantly. It works 90% of the time. Sometimes that fails, but I just find that as a really useful tool. And Buffer is definitely the best one I've tried so far, personally.
Now, is Buffer also the social media management app? So this is a different app?
See. Mm-hmm. It's AnyBuffer. That's the name of it. Okay.
AnyBuffer. Okay. Yeah. I was wondering.
That's my bad, guys. Just go back in time and replace every time I said Buffer with AnyBuffer.
Yeah, find and replace for podcast. And I'll just get right on that.
They do that now. No. Anyway.
Descript. It's close. It's pretty
Descript. Pixu. This app's been around for a while. The developer's been really good at keeping it updated. It is you see those iPad and iPhone images with the frame around it. This creates those pretty much automatically from a screenshot, because it automatically detects the dimensions of the screenshot and knows what device it came from, and will give you options for the different colors of frames to add around it, and spits that out the other side. You can get a PNG output and stuff from that, and it's actually quite nice. I use that a lot for work, especially anytime I need to generate iPhone, iPad, and even Apple Watch images. It comes in handy quite a bit, because you just create the PNG, drop it to the whatever photo editing application, and go from there.
That's pretty cool. I will say also there's a shortcut from Federico Vitici. I'll put this in the show notes too, but it basically detects whatever screenshot that you take and will put the frame of an iPhone or iPad around it too.
I really like Federico's shortcut. The problem with that is you have to keep that up to date yourself. Versus Pixu's a little, I guess again, it's more managed by some guy. I don't have to keep up with it. He just does it, and he's very quick. As soon as Apple puts out the information for the frames, he has it in the app, and there's a lot more image styling tools and stuff. If I ever post a screenshot of my home screen to Twitter or something, I create the image in Pixu first, because it gives you options for generating a background for the device and stuff too. So
that's cool.
But if you want to just go the shortcuts route, Federico's frames shortcuts really good. If I'm using my iPad, I edit in the Affinity suite. As an aside, on the Mac, I use Pixelmator Pro pretty much exclusively. But yeah, if I need to do design work or creating images or editing my raw photos for my Sony camera, I use Affinity Photo or Affinity Designer. I don't use any Adobe apps. I don't really care for any of that nonsense. So I've learned most of my photo editing skills and stuff off these apps, and they're really great. If you're trying to get away from subscription models, this is definitely the way to go. Very powerful apps, especially on iPad. Yeah. They're available on the Mac too, but it's separate purchases, and they have different functionality there as well.
Right.
Wanted to point out Carrot Weather is still amazing. It's iPad application's really cool, and again, just fully customizable UI top to bottom. We've talked about Carrot before. They just won a App Store awards for best Apple Watch app. This design is just really awesome, and definitely an app to have. Even if you have a favorite weather app, just have this one on the side to poke every now and then, because it's just fun to look at. One more, Noir is a extension for Safari. I just love that it works really well, and it seems like the developer is constantly keeping it updated. It turns web page into a dark mode web page by basically inverting it, turning it black or dark gray color, and keeps the images from doing so, and a lot of the content and stuff he's able to keep from being unusable. It's a very intelligent dark mode for Safari, and it also detects if there's already a dark mode and doesn't change anything if there's a built-in dark mode. So something to look at. That's if cool. You want dark mode on your apps.
Very cool.
Just as a shout out, Minecraft, it's probably the best game on iPad. Out of all the games I've played on iOS, iPadOS, Minecraft's definitely the winner. It's just perfectly built for this screen, and throw a controller in and you're good to go. Spent countless hours in that game on this guy. So
very cool. All right. Well, I'm going to try and go lightning round here, because I still have some recommendations for me, and then I want to hit what our listeners sent in for their recommendations. As first party apps go, like Wes was saying, some of Apple's apps are some of the best. And so if you have never tried GarageBand on iPad, it is still an incredible app. My boys use it all the time to just make fun tracks and use some of the drum machine stuff. So GarageBand is still great. Keynote on iPad, of all of Apple's productivity apps, I love Keynote. Even if it's just something where you need to make a slide for whatever that's just 16 by 9. Sometimes I'll just make it in Keynote because they're tools for adding shapes and alignment and gradients and all that stuff. I just love Keynote. So 2 great Apple apps there. For notes, I mentioned it in the Mac apps, but Bear, I use it on all my devices, so iPad as well. And what's nice is on iPad and iPhone, it can actually pull in your text expander snippets. So you can use text expander like you do on the Mac, but use it within Bear, the app, on iPad and iPhone. So love Bear as a note-taking app. I'm going to throw one game in there because Wes threw one game, and I know Wes loves this game too, but Fantasian, which is the Final Fantasy-inspired Apple Arcade game on iPad. Love Fantasian. I've played it a little bit in the past year, and it's just a beautiful game. And as a Final Fantasy fan from back in the day, love that game. Do you still play that one?
Apple gave that Game of the Year in the App Store Awards. I don't know if that's patting themselves on the back. It's an Apple Arcade game,
right?
But I just want to point that out. Yeah. Oh yeah, I still play it. I haven't finished it. Its story is incredibly long, and I jump in and out of it every now and then. I've got through the first half. I'm digging through the second half. It's really fun. Definitely play it.
So MindNode, if you've never used like a mind mapping app or something where you can kind of put ideas and connect them with lines and spokes, MindNode is pretty cool for something like that, even if it's just brainstorming like projects, or I've used it for like org chart design for like a company. So MindNode is pretty cool for that. And then as far as extensions on the iPad, Wes mentioned Noir, but 1Password we've talked about before, their extension for iPad and using it in Safari, definitely really much improved, especially since iPadOS 15. So love 1Password. Hyperweb is one we've mentioned before on our extension episode, but it's kind of an ad blocker, disables Google AMP websites all together, like cookie blocker. So Hyperweb is great. Pipifier for picture-in-picture. Again, iPadOS is usually pretty good at picture-in-picture, but to kind of force it, Pipifier is a good extension. And one more, I think we mentioned it in our extension episode a few weeks ago, Vidimote, Vidimote, Vidimote. This is by developer Felix Schwarz, and this basically adds video player controls in the address bar of iPadOS, where if you click the little extension puzzle piece and Vidimote, it'll give you more controls over the video that's playing, from scrubbing to forwarding 30 seconds, back 30 seconds, going back to the beginning. You can even see like time elapsed, like just gives you a bunch of controls for playing videos in Safari on iPadOS. So highly recommend Vidimote as well. All right. Any last thoughts before I jump into the listener recommendations?
Well, I'll point out, if you want a good app blocker for Safari, I highly recommend OneBlocker X, or whatever they call it these days. Just look up OneBlocker. It's a purple cube.
Yeah.
That guy's, it's insane. I think you can have like 75,000 rules active at once. It goes around Apple's limit. I think their original limit was like 10,000 per Safari extension, like a blocker extension, ad blocker. And instead of using one rule, they have multiple categories that you can activate, and it gets around that limitation. So it's actually really powerful, and it's updated all the time. So I definitely recommend that one.
All right. Well, we had a bunch of listeners write in, and so I'll run through these. These links will also be in the show notes. Again, might not be an Apple podcast just because of the character limit, but if you want to check it out in Overcast, Pocket Cast, or on AppleInsider.com, these will be there. Fernando Silva, he has an awesome YouTube channel really focusing on iPad creativity and productivity. He recommends LumaFusion, which actually Apple announced their apps of the year. Like Wes said, as we're recording, it kind of came out. And Apple said LumaFusion, which is a video editor for iPadOS, actually got iPad app of the year. And if you want to edit video on iPad, LumaFusion is the app to get and try it out. I still hope one day that we'll see Final Cut on iPadOS. I'm still holding out that will happen sometime. But for now, LumaFusion is the pro tool for iPad for sure. Affinity Photo was recommended by Fernando, which Wes mentioned as well. He uses YouTube TV, which if you want to get some live TV channels and other like cable type features, YouTube Live TV is a good one. He recommended Pipifier as well. Microsoft Office Hub app, which is some Microsoft Office thing. Thankfully, I don't have to mess with Office. But
Boo.
I guess in the Microsoft Office world, that's that. PS Remote Play for PlayStation, a game called Marvel Strike Force, and an app called Spike, which is like an email productivity thing and notes. It was a very interesting app. I have not tried it yet, but if any listeners out there also use Spike, I'm curious who uses and what useful tools or what use cases that app is good for.
I've seen spike around, especially like if you search email, it's one of those ones that gets the search ad. It encompasses everything productive into one app, like calendars and notes and reminders. I can't do that. Like Fantastical tries to do that, and I just turn off everything that isn't a calendar. I'm very much a one tool, one job kind of thing. I like that. But if you want to have it all in one, go for it. I think it looks like a cool app. It's just not for me.
Yeah, and I typically don't get integrations with my email. I use, again, Apple's stock mail app most of the time. The one integration I do like cross to do an event type stuff is using Things by Cultured Code. I use it as my task app, and it actually pulls in my calendar events. And the only reason I like that is in the Today view in the Things app, I can see my tasks below and then the few events that I have. You can choose which calendars appear in this little like area at the top of the Things window. And that's helpful just to kind of plan my day to see, okay, I have these events and these are my tasks for today. Where do I want to fit them in? And so I do like that one integration feature for Things. These recommendations came from @CSinars on Twitter. He is still rocking Evernote, which Evernote has been around for a long, long time. I know William was a big user. I know, depending on your use case, Evernote might be a great tool. I know they have like OCR. They have a bunch of features. And so it's still popular amongst a lot of people. So Evernote, and he recommended GoodNotes as well, which was one of my picks. Very cool. Matt Tillotson on Twitter recommended Procreate. And so if you're an artist or you want to draw on your iPad, Procreate is definitely an incredible app. I know lots of people who use it, so great pick there.
Procreate's amazing. They just added a feature recently where you can sketch on 3D models, and I've seen people making skateboards and stuff on there. It's so cool. Like, follow their Twitter. You don't even have to be an artist. Just follow Procreate's Twitter, and you get bombarded with all these just awesome, inspirational like pieces of art all the time. It's really great.
Yeah, that is very cool. Dark Shot Coffee on Twitter. He, like we were talking about before, loves Apple's built-in apps for notes and reminders. So he just used those. And I will say reminders especially has improved greatly in the past couple of years. And so if you have not tried it in a while, I do recommend try out reminders. It's pretty cool. Will Kennard, I hope I'm saying that right, on Twitter, he had a couple recommendations that I actually had not heard of before, or at least one I had not heard of before. He uses Notability, like I mentioned, reminders. He recommended Craft, which they actually just updated to version 2.0 as we record. And I think Craft has a great future ahead of it. It is basically an alternative or a product like Notion. But if you want to kind of create a research database or really, just good looking documents, or you like being able to link back and forth between notes, and maybe you want to create notes and pages where you embed videos and graphics all together, Craft is an incredible tool for that. It really feels like an Apple first application, whereas Notion is really more of a cross-platform first. But Craft, awesome app, great recommendation, Will, there. He also recommended an app called Portal. And this is not Facebook's weird camera thing, Portal. This is actually an environment and like ambient sound application. This was the one I had not heard of before. But you can download this app, and you basically tell it whether you want music or environment stuff to focus or to escape. And it actually has beautiful visuals and audio. It uses spatial audio if you have that in AirPods Pro, AirPods Max. And actually has great ambient sounds and music and this app. And it's just beautiful visuals as well. So really cool app, especially if you want to focus or get some real heavy work done. Great pick from Will. Portal. Highly recommend trying that out.
Yeah, I've used Portal before. It's interesting. I feel like it's best paired with stuff like shortcuts. Set up a scene like you're going to meditate or clean or something, and throw Portal on in the background. And yeah, it can just create really good background noise where maybe you don't want to listen to a podcast at that moment, and it's better to just have something to let you focus on work or whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah. Listener on Twitter, Holger, actually recommended this weather app called Weather Gods. I had not heard of this app before, but it's pretty highly reviewed. And so if you like to try different weather apps on your iPad, Weather Gods, that link will be in the list as well. And finally, listener Bimo Nukusmo, forgive me again with pronunciations, I'm trying my best here, but he had some recommendations. Procreate, which we mentioned, LumaFusion for video editing, Pixelmator, and Affinity Photo. We mentioned all those, but he also recommended an app called Vectornator. And these were all apps really focused on creative work, graphic design, illustration. And Vectornator is a really cool app. I had not used it or heard about it before. But again, if you're into that illustration, graphic design world, that might be really helpful for your workflow. Vectornator, again, All those apps and links will be in the show notes. And that is our massive, massive roundup of iPad apps. Any last ideas, Wes?
It's Steven's roundup of notes apps and Wesley's productivity tools. There
all
you go.
Great. All great apps. A note app for every listener. That was the goal for this. But
that's it. Good selection, though.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really good. And good on you. I mean, I feel like we covered so many of the really big ones, useful ones. If we missed one, listeners, tweet at Wes and myself. Let us know if there's an app we didn't mention that you love on the iPad, or if you have some recommendations for iPhone apps. I think we did Mac on the last episode. We did iPad on this one. I'd like to do iPhone on the next one. So if you have iPhone apps that you love, tweet those at myself or Wes. Our Twitter handles are in the show notes. Let us know your iPad apps.
Yeah, it might surprise you to know that the iPhone apps will be different from the iPad apps. So
for sure, because different platforms, different apps. I mean, just by the nature of the apps, some are more useful on a phone or on an iPad. So tune in next week for those. Send us those recommendations. If you haven't yet, you can really support the show by giving us a 5-star rating and review in Apple Podcasts. That helps us out. And you can also support the show with $5 a month and get an ad-free, uninterrupted version and early access. You can do that right there in Apple Podcasts. And there's a bunch of you that actually do that. So thank you to all of our paid supporters. And on patreon.com/AppleInsider, you could do it there as well if you prefer that. Don't forget to tune into HomeKit Insider. Andrew and I are doing a big roundup of all of our favorite HomeKit devices this month. So you want to check out that podcast. It comes out every Monday. And that link will be in the show notes to that show as well.
Well, Stephen, wait. I'm not going to let you end it there because listeners, you have to go to the HomeKit Insider YouTube page and subscribe because if we get 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, Stephen will on video put glitter in his beard and it's going to be there for the rest of his life. So definitely do that, guys. Go subscribe, give some Apple Insider love to the HomeKit crew, and let's see this happen. This is going to be fun.
And we actually have a short URL now, so you can just go to youtube.com/HomeKitInsider, subscribe, and you can watch Andrew O'Hara and myself talk about HomeKit stuff. And yes, if we reach 1,000 subscribers by Christmas Day, I am going to be putting glitter in my beard live on camera, and I'm terrified of this, but it's going to happen.
Glitter in the keyboard, glitter in the iPad.
I'm going to have to figure out how to isolate. I need to isolate my face and protect my desk. I don't know. There's a lot of practical questions about this, so we will see. But all those links will be in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.